Okay, everybody. Douglas Finance Committee coming to order on Tuesday, June 27, and we'll start by saying our names just for the record. So Howard, why don't you begin?
Howard D'Amico, Finance Committee.
Sandy Kuipers, Finance Committee.
Dick Vandenberg.
Ryan Hogan.
Heather Moore.
So we have our quorum. All right, so if you look at your order of your agenda, I have for number 2, budget presentation, which is kind of incorrect because the budget's already been approved by the town meeting, but it's more just an update on where the discussion has been having to do with some more revenue we need to find. So Paul or Courtney, you want to come to the mic? And then Matt, if you would like to afterwards. So why don't you start, Paul?
Sure, thank you for having
It was
us.
about
343.
343.
334, sorry.
Okay.
Got my,
Yeah, he's still asking.
the numbers transfer. I can be at times. So thank you for having us back, and happy summer to everyone. So since we last met in early April, myself, Courtney, Jean, and Matt have probably met about 3 or 4 times. Been a very collaborative meeting, been very cooperative, very collegial, and we've had a lot of discussions around the process and where we're going to go from here. Obviously, as a school department, we would like the full 334, but we also understand we're one of the departments of the town, and there's only so much money to go around. Obviously, the closer we get to 334, the better off we are in FY24, and the better off we are in FY25 going forward.
Or is it 343?
334.
334.
Okay.
So where we're at after this discussion is we have to wait for FY23 to close out. We have to wait for new growth to get certified. And once those 2 things are done, we're going to get back together, I believe, in 6 to 8 weeks and have a discussion to see what that reallocation of funds will be towards the school department. From there, we'll decide and agree upon a final appropriation for FY24, so that way we know what we're building off of for FY25. But right now, we have to wait for 23 to close out and for new growth to be certified. So again, met about 3-4 times, a couple times in this room, a couple times next door, and again, been a very collaborative process. So I'm appreciative of that, appreciative of everyone looking to help out and resolve the issue.
Courtney, anything to add to that?
No, just that, as we know, and I know Jean reminds everyone on a regular basis, is, you know how the annual town meeting is kind of like phase 1 oftentimes, and we use the special town meeting as phase 2. It's kind of, we kind of see that as kind of the same thing, because we know how their state is often very late in getting the town, the final cherry sheet figures and new growth, or, you know, free cash, or whatever it is, and closing out the books, reconciling, getting ready for the audit and all of that. So we understand that, so.
So Courtney, for our viewers, tell everybody what the cherry sheet number is, what that means exactly, okay?
The state revenue, basically. And the only reason they call it is cherry sheet is because it used to come out on cherry-colored paper, and that's the only reason they call it that. Massachusetts has some very strange phrases that, for instance, free cash. We ever heard of free cash? Where is there ever free cash, right? But, yeah. So we understand that, and we still have time. We have the summertime, and the meeting, the special town meeting is not until November, so that gives everyone time to look at the whole full picture on both sides of the equation and go from there.
Right. FinCom members, any questions for either Paul or Courtney?
I have a couple. So how did you close the gap for the year?
We took it out of school choice,
Okay.
yeah, because we had already made reductions or adjustments of $750,000, even to get to the figure that we had. So we were actually in a situation, as we had spoken about, I believe, at the last Finance Committee meeting, we did not want to look at reducing or eliminating any staff.
Here, Carol.
So,
I did hear that. So kind of through the grapevine, I'm not sure it's accurate or not, I had heard that the athletic budget had been cut. Is that not correct?
oh yeah, there were reductions all
All
across the
across
entire
the board.
budget, but not the program or anything, just some reductions to supplies and things of that nature.
Okay, because I had heard 100,000 was cut out of the athletic budget, which was,
Oh, I don't have that right in front of me, but
okay.
I don't know.
So the process started back in October, November, where principals presented their, going back to athletics and all departments, people asked for new positions, people asked for additional sports, people asked for instance, one of the things that was asked for was an athletic trainer at about $40,000 to $50,000. So that was reduced from the athletic budget. In order to get down to the appropriation, we had to reduce $750,000, and that came across the board through all departments. So there were some reductions in the athletic department. I don't know if it came to $100,000, but some of the asks in the athletic department were for a trainer, which we had to
And they've been
eliminate.
asking for that
And they've
for a
been asking that
number of
forever.
years, but yeah.
Correct.
But not at a higher dollar amount,
Increase
though.
But, so, again, you hear things through
Yeah.
town, so I heard it was a recent cut of 100,000 out of the.
But we still have the same programs next year. Same sports, same programs, same supplies.
Okay, be the same experience for the
Well, not the
kids.
same,
well,
not the
same
same
ex-
supplies, but.
Not the same,
Yeah,
same experience for
because
the
we did-
kids. So
right.
we have, if we still need to run a JV and a varsity soccer team, we'll run a JV and a varsity soccer team. If we're just running a varsity, we're running a varsity.
Okay.
Yep.
And some of the, out of the 750,000, that's why I said reductions and adjustments as well, is that for a few years, I've been trying to get the athletic department, particularly at the high school, to utilize some of their donation accounts. So we basically cleaned those out, donations that have been there for a couple of years, too. So we may have removed it from the budget, but it's going to be paid for by donations, so. And that's a small dollar amount, but still.
Okay.
And again, supplies, keep in mind that, there are a number of supplies that they would like to have. It would be, best case scenario, but doesn't mean that it would affect the program going forward, not having 100% of all of those supplies. So the textbooks are a big thing.
Yeah.
We removed, that's a big thing. The iPads are a big thing. Making adjustments to budgets, this is what we would like to have, is a little bit different if it's not changing the program and the experience for the students.
Okay.
So,
As long as the experience won't change for the students, that's what we're looking for.
yep, none of the
Correct.
sports were reduced.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else questions for, welcome, Carol?
Thank you.
Jean, go ahead, Howard.
So when we met in about April, my recollection was you were about $334,000 from where you wanted to be to budget everything you wanted to budget for FY '24.
Correct.
Oh, well, no.
Go ahead.
Well-
Yeah, because remember, the 15 million that we had was after removing the 750,000. Now, albeit some of those were adjustments, like the oil bid came in really well, so I reduced that amount, but then there were substantial cuts to things like textbooks and iPads and things as well, to come down to that number.
But I remember there was a gap, and the two sides, from my perspective, agreed that there would be further discussion.
Oh, yes.
Try to remediate that.
Correct.
Take care of that. We had a number of folks here from the town, including folks employed by the town, speaking on the issue. So as we started tonight, I heard the number 334, and it did come close to where I had a perception we had been. And then I think to Mr. Hogan's question, the answer was we closed the gap. What did that mean?
We used school choice. In other words, we used more school choice. In other words, we didn't reduce, we didn't eliminate positions, any further positions or anything, because we already had the 750,000.
Okay.
So we utilized school choice. As you know, we utilize circuit breaker, school choice, preschool tuition, athletic fees, and grants and things of that nature to reduce our full operating budget. We just further utilized more than what we already had utilized, school choice, to close the gap on our end.
So I'm maybe slow picking up on this over the years. Why wouldn't you have already used that?
Oh, we did, by a huge extent, more than we have in the past, yeah. So now we're even further using it.
Is school choice some kind of a savings account?
No, it's a revolving fund, and it's made up of school choice tuitions.
Okay,
And we've always used school choice to offset the budget.
right, but
Yeah.
why wouldn't that have already been available when we met in early April?
No,
As a remedy.
we had used school choice
Right.
to a large extent to bring it down to that 15 million. So using that much more puts us in a
How is there
precarious
more available?
situation.
So typically,
So
go
we
ahead.
we usually always have a balance, a contingency balance. We don't bring it down to zero because things come up during the year that we have to take care of. We don't ever come to the Finance Committee and ask for reserve fund transfer.
Okay.
We take care of maintaining buildings if it goes over what we budgeted, and a number of things that come up during the year
So in coming close
from
to
that.
zero, in order to close the gap, how close to zero are we?
You mean
If you
zero?
use 334 to close the gap.
Yeah.
How much is left in the school choice?
Well, we have, I mean, I might have,
Yeah, I won't have that number until this year.
yeah.
So what we did is, what we like to
Were we
do,
at 335 and went down to 1, or were we at 2 million, went down to 1 million?
Closer to that.
65.
so we were at that 1.3, I'll have Courtney give you the, yeah.
I don't know off the top of my head, I just know it's not 2 million.
But you dug in further than.
We dug in further than we normally do, correct.
With the idea that the events that could occur between town meeting and special town meeting might refill it.
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Courtney,
Okay, because what I have right now are just projections for '23 and '24.
No.
So,
I just,
yeah, okay.
something that for 7 or 8 years has struck me as could always be done, but folks were hesitant to do this year. So there are no, at the moment, for FY '24 and for the fall year, school year, we don't have any positions cut. Is that correct?
We do not.
We do not.
Okay.
No. And that's why we did that, Howard. We did not want, we wanted to maintain stability in the school district.
No?
Because that's hugely important.
The other day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've talked about that forever.
Oh, yeah, and back even before, the whole idea since 2018, FY 2018, was to maintain stability. Now, certainly, if there's a position not needed, we have no problem eliminating or reducing it, just to make that clear.
To
Yeah.
Ryan's question, and something that's always been on my mind, have the fees for participation, will those be going up this fall?
Stay the
No, they're
same.
staying the same.
What are those? Are those 175?
It is, I think it's 180 for middle school, 200, 180 for high school, 160 for middle school.
Okay.
They just voted them to remain,
Okay.
And I think we did have a lot of discussion about that, and part of it is coming out of COVID and with all of the other situations going on with parents and students, the biggest thing for us was they lost a lot during COVID. We want to make sure that, to the extent possible, more of our students can participate in our programs, both our enrichment programs, we didn't increase anything there, or the
User fees.
user fees for the middle school or the high school athletic program. We thought that was very important, and the school committee agreed as well. We presented that to them, and they approved it recently.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Anybody else, FinCom, for Paul or Courtney? So Jean, do you mind coming up to the table with a chair? Just pull a chair up.
I'll sit there, Howard.
Yeah, come on in.
So can you just explain partly to us again, but for our huge viewing audience, what are the unknown incomes yet that you're waiting on?
For FY '24,
Yeah.
we don't have the final cherry sheet numbers.
Is that the only?
And new growth.
Okay, and when will those come, and can we
Cherry sheet.
predict anything or not?
No predictions. Cherry
No.
sheet
I agree with that.
will be in July,
Are
and
we talking July 2 or July 30?
it's up to the state.
Okay.
And we expect end of summer for new growth.
End of August.
Yeah. And by that time, you'll also, speaking to Courtney's point about where, we would have a better idea of where school choice and circuit breaker land, because we would have done the year-end transfers for the school department, as well as any adjustments for grants by that time frame as well. So we'll have your answer.
So generally speaking, with the cherry sheet numbers, if we look back on them over the last 5 years or 10 years, would there be wild swings in the amount or not?
There'll be adjustments. I think, 2 years ago, that would have been, any swing would have been a problem, right? Because the budget was so tight. The thing that we look at is the assessment side, is school choice out, whether or not there's an increase there. So, again, we'll have a better idea at the end of, when you're deciding on your first meeting. So we can probably put that on your agenda for your first meeting.
And then the new growth numbers, again, if you looked at the last 10 years, would there be wild swings or not?
Well, it's been going up, and I think Matt could probably speak to that. Chris expects it to be higher than what we used as an estimate.
And that's the end of August, you said, right?
Yes, he expects it to be at the end of summer.
Okay. So those are two wild cards in terms of income
And that's why we...
that are
look at the fall
crucial to
town
the
meeting.
story, correct?
Yeah. The third component with that would be free cash, but we have not been using free cash as a funding source for the operating budget.
Right.
We're going with the philosophy, haste makes waste, and we're trying to go slow and not rush the process. We know we have until October to put the warrant in the November town meeting, so let's
Yeah.
wait until everything comes in. Let's wait for the dust to settle in FY '23. Let's take the time to step away from the '23 school year, and then see what happens July and August with the new governor coming on, still waiting on some things. So let's wait until August, September, and not rush to
Yep.
getting a number until we have firm figures.
Yep.
It doesn't really help anyone, whether it be
No.
the town side. We're only one department of many in the town, and we wouldn't want the town to be doing something based on numbers that aren't final yet, because that's not going to help us either in the future. That doesn't
No.
help anything. It's
And
all
we-
one town.
We are,
So,
generating the list of
Yeah.
other departments that have needs that need to be addressed at the fall town meeting as well. So as Courtney explained, over the last several years, we look at the spring town meeting and the fall town meeting as the budget for the upcoming new, fiscal year. You need those. We've been lucky enough to, increase the tree warden expense at the fall town meeting and make any adjustments, because we're already a quarter into the year.
Yeah.
We've had, departments identify issues that they weren't aware of in March. You're planning the budget so far.
So early, right, so far in advance, yeah.
So we're already compiling that list of departments that need some adjustments at the fall.
All right. Thanks, Gene. Any questions for Gene, anybody? Matt, could you pull the chair up? Just join us a little bit. So what's your overview of the process so far of this issue, not town-wide stuff, which we'll get to later, but
I don't project well this time of day.
what's the bird's eye view from the town administrator's seat?
Well, I'm going to shock you and tell you that I end up in a similar final resting point, but the journey I take is very different. Because I don't listen to talk. I really, when it comes to financial information, it's numbers on a spreadsheet, and the numbers tell the story. We don't need to inject any editorialization into what makes things tick. Sitting here listening to the conversation, I feel the need to point out a couple of things. One is, the school department budget has two major operating components. There's Chapter 70, which has really been stable. It's been up and down a little bit, but the total change over the last 4 years is less than 0.5%.
And for our viewers,
It's about
tell us
$8
what
million.
Chapter 70
Chapter
is.
70 is a formula block grant that the state uses to distribute aid to the towns
Okay.
for education. So we're right around 8 million. And the rest of the funding for the school department comes from the town, from the levy, from what we raise and appropriate, which is growing at a pretty significant clip. It grows at about 3.5% a year. So if you have a $15 million budget, you get about 8 million from Chapter 70, and about 7 million comes from the taxpayers of the town. Does everybody understand that? So that's your operating budget. And there are sources of one-time revenue, or, revenue that should only be used for one-time expenses or for programmatically designed expenses that we call reserves. So your two biggest are Choice In, which is the tuition we collect from students who matriculate here instead of their hometown, and Circuit Breaker, which is a very complex program of picking up expenses for special education that are specifically qualified. You can only ask for those things that are allowed. And your Circuit Breaker stream is going to be volatile, right? It's going to depend on the students' needs, how many of those students are enrolled. So you can't really look at that as a really strong source of reserves. That's a The operational dynamic is that it lags behind, so the school department will pay for things and then ask for reimbursement from the state, and it may be some time before that gets rebuilt. Having said that, over time, there's a trend that, in my opinion, the Finance Committee should be mindful of. Choice Inn's a little bit different. Choice Inn tends to be a good deal more stable, and it grows at a pretty decent clip.
Every year?
Every year it's a little bit more. There are years when it goes down, but for the most part, it goes up. When you look at the total resources that the school department has available to it to pay for its expenses, it's its operating budget plus however much of the reserves that they're qualified to spend on and that the school committee authorizes be spent out of reserves. So I think it's helpful. I did not have time to do a slide deck tonight. I will be getting something to you. But over time, there is a snapshot every single year at the close of books, at the reserve levels, that each entity of the town has. For us, it's free cash. For the school, there are a number of reserve accounts. Most of them are small. There's food service, there's other things, donations. The sum total of the reserves available to the school department has been on a steady increase, especially since the override. So the budget flexibility experienced by both the town and the school is similar, that by being able to put money into reserves, either free cash or being able to manage the use of reserves carefully to allow it to build, is really a luxury, and a lot of communities don't have, and we've had. And that's what the backdrop was, in my opinion. The resources built up to the point where the school committee and the school administration could satisfy the quote-unquote budget shortfall this year without laying off teachers. Now, as the sole victim of the gaslighting effort at the last meeting, I'm not a fan of having the teachers union sit here all ginned up about pink slips going out, and then to come here tonight and hear, well, that just went away because we decided to use reserves. It was an unnecessary punch to the gut that I hope never repeats itself. It has done incredible damage to the credibility of the people I work with on this effort, because there is no need to politically isolate and in some ways try to humiliate the town administrator who was actually trying to help you. So I had to say that for the record. I'm not even close to recovered from that meeting. However, what I do, and as a business consultant, I have always done it, I've never seen it go wrong, is I try to identify drivers in a budget that are causing the budget to change. I'm not looking for the biggest account. I'm looking for the sources of change. What is driving the need for additional resources from one year to the next? It's really a simple exercise. We have a chart of accounts that has activity codes, that each one of them has meaning. 5100 series, for the 51,000, we want to call it 5100s, are mostly wages and compensation salaries. And you go all the way on down, each item in the school department has there's contractual services, there's textbooks, there's IT expenses, and we share the chart of accounts, so the same thing that might be scored in IT expense in Jean's ledger is in Courtney's the same. So if we needed to, we could sum all this up and say the town spends X on IT because we have all the same activity codes. So if you look at the trend from fiscal '22, which is a closed year that's been audited, fiscal '23, which is still open, and the '24 budget, you should be able to look at 3-year trends and identify those accounts that are growing against the baseline. So that's a necessary step to having an intelligent conversation about why a budget goes up or not. At the end of the day, and I'm still working hard on trying to tease out and make sure my figures are accurate, but salaries and compensation in fiscal '23 grew 3% over fiscal '22. And in fiscal '24, the budget is for it to go up by 2.5% over fiscal '23. Now, a little bit of a lot is a lot. But the expenses went up 14.6% from 23 to 22 and 7.3% from 24 to 23. It's not a lot of money. Expenses are a very small amount of the school budget. It's a very different budget from ours, where we buy a lot of stuff. They don't. It's mostly people. So when we established the subsidy to support the contract, I used an estimate that was based on a number of major principles. One is, we were not going to pay 100% for the impact of the DTA contract. It was a subsidy. It was meant to provide the schools with sufficient budget flexibility from their year-over-year increase from the levy that comes out of the town, and still pay its bills that year. And that over time, the town's contribution to the schools would grow by 2% a year, so about $280,000 a year. By the time you get to year 3, call me crazy, but that's $840,000 more in the year 3 than it would have been at the beginning of year 1. So when we looked at the cost of the contract, what I said was, we're going to provide you with that year-over-year 2%, and then the subsidy, compare the cost of the contract to the bottom line to what we're going to provide you. In a regular year with no subsidy, if we give the schools a 1.75% increase, that's for everything. Salaries, wages, compensation, athletics, programs. So we provided 2%, which was a historical high, plus a subsidy. The subsidy of $320 some odd thousand is significantly more than $280,000 that just came from the bottom line local contribution from the levy. So if that year alone was $600,000, it wasn't built back into the base because the base is supposed to be catching up to pay those salaries. The subsidy was established on a worst-case scenario. So in other words, what is the most expensive expression of the teacher contract that could happen? We will size the subsidy accordingly, so if nobody retires, and lots of people get steps and lanes, really steps, we will have given you a subsidy sufficient to meet that scenario. Anything that's less is, you can call it gravy, you can call it budget flexibility, whatever you want to call it. So if the payroll didn't increase by as much as I forecast it would, I didn't change the subsidy provided by the town from free cash. I left it the same. So I think there's a deeper explanation here. I don't think that's anything particularly nefarious. I just think this is a complicated organization. I don't look at the DTA contract as a source of issues here. I think there are other contracts that were settled at the same time, with paras and ABAs, custodians, food service workers. There are expense profiles that have gone up, and there are programmatic changes that have occurred in special ed in particular, but not necessarily the only one, that required the school department to step up and face a number of mandates that are not necessarily funded by anyone. The big ugly one that we look at right now is, I'm going to say this wrong, Paul, so you can help me out. We are looking over the precipice of a very large increase in what the state expects us to pay for, now is it out-of-district tuitions?
Correct. Our OSD rate, which historically has hovered around 2.5% over the past 12 years. This year, they upped it to 14%, which was an increase to our budget of $150,000. When everyone saw that, we spoke with our state legislators, and the governor has since put aside $20 million to try to lessen that gap, and then upped it to $90 million. Right now, what's happening is, as the discussion, the simple formula would be, if we have 90 million, how do we reduce that 14% to just an even 8%, 7%, 6% across the Commonwealth? They're playing with a variety of formulas. They're looking at that as one option. They're looking at giving some of the bigger communities or some of the communities with a higher special education population or a higher EL population a greater increase or a greater flexibility, and some smaller communities less money back. So until that's finalized, we don't know what's going to happen with that. But right now, the change in our budget was approximately $150,000.
And when will we
did
know
talk
that,
about
Paul?
During the budget presentation.
They still haven't told us.
I mean, we talked.
So it's an unfunded mandate. So first of all,
Yeah.
it is not at the doorstep of the school administration or the school committee to be able to fix it. It's just somebody showed up with a big bill and said, you have to pay this, and then not people we can ignore. I know it was mentioned, but I think it could have been more up in the forefront of, this is why we're in a little bit of a stressful condition, because it is a driver. If $150,000 is a little bit less than half of the 334 that they're short.
Right.
And it wasn't something that I could have anticipated writing the budget for the DTA contract. That wasn't, the subsidy was only for the contract, it wasn't for the school department as a whole. So as far as I'm concerned, unless somebody tells me different, this is going to be a recurring expense. And the Commonwealth's going to keep coming back to us using that 150 increase as the new base for the next year. So on that logic alone, we as a town have to identify recurring sources of revenue that close that part of the gap for the schools. I don't think that's a negotiable thing. I think we really need to do that. That is just a basic legal compliance requirement. And it isn't something that anybody can do anything about. The last thing I heard at my association meeting a week ago was that the bill is in conference, and as the superintendent noted, the gateway communities and the communities that have a significant burden are making a run for the money. And as you know, the speaker is putting together votes and doesn't like dissent of any kind. And so that's probably what we're going to see.
The other thing that's,
But we don't know when we'll
we
see
don't
it,
know when.
right?
The other thing that's,
No.
our kids have been lucky for the past 2 years. We've had free lunch and free breakfast. Well, nothing's free. Fully reimbursed.
Free cash.
Breakfast, breakfast and lunch for students. And it's been truly wonderful to see that, kids don't have to worry about funding the meals. Parents don't have to worry about funding lunches. So that's been something that's been funded for the past 2 years. That's also at the doorstep in Boston, where can we continue to fully reimburse breakfast and lunch for all students across the Commonwealth? So those are
The
really
United States of America.
across the United States, but I'm thinking right now in Massachusetts. So those are really the two big dollar amounts that are trying to get pushed back into schools, is how can we get more money to lower the OSD rate, and how can we continue to fund fully reimbursable lunches and breakfasts for students.
And again, it was an unknown when I did come here and talk exactly what was stated here this evening. But again, there was nothing that we could say in finality. Just like on the town side, they don't want to come forward unless they have something concrete from the state. We also aren't going to come forward and say anything unless we have something concrete from the state. So we are hopeful that they will remediate that in some way financially, but we do not have anything. And kind of like Gino always said, we're not going to say, oh, we're pretty sure we're going to get something. There's no way we're going to say that until we have it in black and white and know it's coming.
There's no way we'll put a number to it. I'm less cautious. There is a point at which intelligent people having a conversation about financial planning have to be able to say where the markers are. Our new growth figure was very conservative when it was put in the budget. I'm going to honor Chris's request and not get into a lot of details, but Chris being the principal assessor, we think that was suitably conservative, that there is headroom above what we put in the budget. And I'm not exactly sure how much that's going to be, but it will help us at Fall Town Meeting take a number of steps.
So Matt, is it your sense too, though, that once we get the new growth and the cherry sheet numbers in, that will clarify?
It will clarify things. But let's be clear about what we're clarifying. Our cherry sheet almost never changes from House 1 to the final product. The wild cards in the past have been UGA, Unrestricted General Government Assistance, which is really revenue sharing by the state.
Yep.
And the Baker administration had made year-over-year increases, a major part of his approach to budgeting for UGA. Governor Healy has indicated that she doesn't necessarily want to change that, so our preliminary cherry sheet does show us with a decent increase in UGA, but it pales in comparison with Chapter 70. It's a tiny fraction of what we get from 70. 70 won't change. Pilot is a formula based on the number of acres in the forest and the valuation that's already been established. So there isn't going to be a huge change to pilot. There is some conversation that the original budget from the governor is lower than what we're going to get from the conference committee. I'm cautiously optimistic. Just remember, we get like 0.0026% of the state's pilot budget, so it is what it is. The biggest wild card, the number that swings back and forth, and I think is a policy debate at the State House that I haven't bothered to follow because I think it's too many moving parts to it, but there's a charter school reimbursement and charter school fees. I don't know what they're up to. Like, one year it's a lot of money, the next year it's zero. They claw things back. I think it's an absurd thing. So we don't even really look at it as a source of revenue to the town. It's not reliable. And I don't think anything's going to come out of that this year. Not for us, maybe for some towns, but not for Douglas.
So for Gene and you two guys and then Matt, is your sense, is all of you kind of sense that when we meet again in September, we'll have a clearer sense of where we stand in terms of income that we don't quite have yet?
I
Yeah.
would hope so, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, Matt, you too, or not?
The big numbers for me are new growth and free cash. Well, we're going to certify for those two. And the other thing that I am really paying a lot of attention to is when will the new building join the tax base, and when will that new growth be a part of our budget? Because some of what, there's no need to get into too much claws and scratching and flying for over this year's budget, because the sincere hope is that some, not all, or most of our problems can be addressed in some way, shape, or form by a boost in the tax base.
Yeah.
And that's why it's worth it to stay civil. I am going to, though, pass out. This is the activity code breakout. I don't expect to answer any questions right now on it. What I'm looking to draw your attention to is that this is the form of analysis we need to do every year when the school department comes in before the finance committee to talk about its budget. The budget is too complex to simply take as a PDF and page through it and think you know what you're looking at. There's a level of analysis that has to be done to show what's changing and what's different from years past.
Are you saying that analysis needs to be done with finance?
Somebody has to.
Because we do that all the time.
So
Between us.
this is an example. Because those highly directed questions would help get past the initial presentation into what's really going on. The final school committee budget, Gene and I received the day after your last meeting as FinCom. So that final figure, that 15,064, whatever it is, 065,318, we had not seen that finalized figure until after the finance committee had finished its work. So I think the lesson learned this year is that we need to start with the school department a little bit earlier in the process
Correct me if I'm
and
wrong.
identify some drivers.
But did we not send over the budget in full, the 30-page document in February?
Yes, we did.
Okay, so,
No.
and when was the
So,
finance
no,
committee?
no,
Hold on,
I-
excuse me. When was the finance committee meeting? Was that the end of March?
We had March 28, March 21.
Okay, so it's inaccurate to say that that document was only presented after the school committee's public hearing in April. That budget was sent over here to this office,
All right, so
like it is every year in
this is a-
February.
This is an example of, I don't understand why you're arguing with me.
Yeah.
It's simple.
Dick,
The
what's
superintendent's.
next on our agenda, Dick? Where are we?
We're still looking.
But I'm not going to be shut down when the question is the veracity of something I'm saying. The superintendent sent his budget in February. The business manager just told you the school committee approved the budget in April. The budget that was passed in April was not the same one that was sent here in February. That's the point. So
I think
the process needs to be upped so that what you're looking at, don't, oh God me, you can't make financial decisions until you have a final number approved by your department head, which is not you. It's the school committee. Until the school committee signs off on a budget, it's not ready for you, because it's all about department head requests and superintendent's requests, and it's not about what you're actually being asked to fund, which comes from the school committee. I'm pointing to the chair, it's probably not fair, but that is what you need.
Sorry.
So,
You're trying to get my attention.
So, I mean, we can close this
Yeah.
conversation, but
Actually, what we do, if you
So-
don't mind, Mike, because it is our department.
For
we're the ones that
process-
Work with it every day.
Yep.
We
Every
prepare a needs budget, and everybody knows that. The finance committee has been getting that the entire 11 years I've been here. The finance director and whoever the town administrator was at the time has been getting that as well. The school department feels it's very important, just like with capital planning. We prepare a budget of what our needs are. We know it's going to be cut and cut and cut and cut, but we don't want someone to come to us later on if we didn't prepare a needs budget, and then all of a sudden we have to cut a sports program or something. Why didn't you let us know that you had those needs? It's important to us to let everybody on the town side know what our needs are, and then, yes, of course, we know we have to reduce that budget. And then we go through the painstaking process of having many, many meetings internally, subcommittee meetings with the school committee, and yes, we do end up proposing a budget to the school committee, that we have to bring down, and then we had to do it again because it was further reduced, that we had to do it again even after our public hearing. We
just-
didn't get that final appropriation figure
So-
until just before
And
the
just for a
public
quick
hearing.
point of clarification on this document
Yeah.
that I know we need to move.
Yeah.
Want to be really, we have function codes here, which I'm sure to object codes.
Those are just object
It'd be
codes.
great to have the description as to what these stand for people who may not know. Also, it's
Yeah, it's
important
not
to
the
point out,
function code, we don't know whether or not it's all funding sources or just general fund or whatever, but.
that I believe
These are all
FY,
general fund.
I believe
Yeah,
FY,
that's only part of our operating budget.
I believe FY
it's the
'22 is
part you're asking
actual.
us to
No,
fund.
no, but wait a minute now. Can I?
Yeah,
we'll move it.
This-
Please.
yeah, we're going to let Paul finish.
Yeah.
And I believe
Then
FY
we're gonna move
'22
on.
was actuals, and FY '23 and '24 was budgeted, so we're not comparing apples to apples there. And again, this is only what we're asking the town. We fund a large portion of our budget, both 3 to 4 million of it, through school choice and grants. So this is only tells one snapshot of what our budget
But
is.
not only that, we are
And that's it.
required by law to provide a budget, a full budget, regardless of funding sources. In fact, there was someone on the finance committee here that actually thought, when I presented our budget, because it just wasn't, I know it's many, many pages, that we weren't even budgeting anything for maintenance. But if you look, we do put in the full operating budget, and it was offset by school choice. That's why you saw in the general fund column, I'm showing you every single detail, the full operating budget, all the funding sources, not just what we end up getting from the town after cutting $750,000, after, all of the other millions of dollars of funding sources.
So there may be
So
a
I'm going to,
difference.
But we look forward
I'm
to
going to do
coming
the
back in
gavel.
September. Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm doing the gavel. So
yeah.
in terms of what we're talking about tonight,
God forbid you take this and
I think
learn something.
everybody's in agreement, we Finance Committee, that we have some numbers to wait for in terms of closing that gap, and we'll have a better sense of those numbers when we meet in September, correct?
Correct.
Everybody agree with that?
Yes.
No,
I think, yeah, Howard?
I think it would be better if we wait till October.
Well, for our meeting, you mean?
Yes,
And not meet in September?
correct.
Well, we'll talk about that when we get to the an
You
agenda.
made the statement and asked if everyone agreed, and I just wanted to go on record.
Okay, gotcha. And then in terms of process, I think when we start the process again in the fall for the next year, we'll just be in discussion on how we can make sure everything is clear and there isn't any confusion. But
100%.
Yeah, there's never been any confusion over the 11 years I've been here, so
So-
try to put everything out there.
So any more questions? Anybody on the,
Plenty of confusion. People don't know what they're voting.
yeah, go ahead,
Can I
Ryan.
just ask one question, which
Yeah.
I wanted to ask 15 minutes ago, but I couldn't get in. I just want to make sure I understand the out-of-district rate increase. So it said it went from 2.5% to 14%.
Correct.
So does that mean you were responsible for paying 2.5% of the budget, and now you're responsible?
So
there's-
the
oh,
the increase from one fiscal year to the other fiscal year?
No,
Go ahead,
it's the
Courtney.
OSD rate, because the
Yes.
state sets the OSD rate.
Right.
So the schools, if they actually determine what the rate is that they're going to get for that particular out-of-district school, it's the increase to that rate, which in turn, of course, is what's going to be on our invoice when we get billed.
But the tuition.
So the tuition was going up 2.5% every year?
Yeah.
And this year, in average, over, an average of 2.5% over the past 12 years. This year, it jumped from 2.5% to 14% increase.
And not all schools, because they don't do collaboratives, but it's only certain schools.
Okay, I'm sorry. Now, so, I don't think this is correct, but I just want, so it's not that the state went from paying 97.5 to 86. No, it's that the rates the schools are charging, and who approves, how does the school get to decide I'm going to charge?
No, the school doesn't. It's the state, the OSD on the state level. They determine for certain schools what they're allowed to charge, what their rate's going to be for every fiscal year.
Could you tell us what OSD stands for?
Occupational Services Division.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So you're telling us the state decided that they were going to allow the schools to charge every town an 11.5, an increase from 2.5% to 14%?
Correct.
Well, the
growth, the
individual
rate of growth.
schools can invoice us, if that's the rate that's approved by OSD, that they can charge
With no additional
us.
funding to the school, to any,
Thus far.
Thus far.
Thus far.
The Operational Services Division negotiates contracts on behalf of the state and municipalities. When they establish those prices, they're locked for the schools. But if they negotiate a contract with the Legion Ford that such and such a truck's 20 grand, and that's what I pay, 20 grand. But it's much more pressing for them, because if the student needs to go to X school, and OSD says X schools last year got 100, this year they're getting 114, they have to come up with 114.
Right.
Yeah, still don't quite understand who decides what
they
that
have
rate is,
the
but I do
bargaining
understand the increase now, the
It's the
state.
state.
They have the bargaining power. So if we negotiated individually as a small school district with some of these institutions, we may not get as good a deal as the state does establishing the rates.
But there is a limited number of schools, and they're very particular to what students they serve and things of that nature. So it's even more complicated than that as well, but, you know, we don't have a lot of schools to choose.
I know you're hearing this for the first time. When we first heard it, we were, yeah, we were the same spot you were.
One other point I'd like to make, and I'm not choosing sides here. In my 8 years, I would like to try to find a way to allow us to understand the school budget, the 50-page document. All the information is there, I 100% agree, but it's very hard to work through and find out it's by school. So if we as a committee could work with the school administration to
Whatever
find
you'd
an
like.
easier way to present that, whether it's year over year or whatever, and I'm happy to contribute to that. I personally would find that helpful in future.
And anytime
We
you
can
want to come
create
in
additional
and sit with us,
documents. Yeah, we definitely could do that. The budget document, we have to have, you know, by function code, that's all determined by DESE, but we'd be happy to produce. any-
Sure, maybe it's summary pages
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
something, just because,
Sure.
you know,
Yeah.
it's just, I've spent hours trying to go through it, and I don't feel like I get anywhere. So while we're on the topic, I would love to find a
and
way to.
what's tricky about our budget, then I promise I'm done, is that in a lot of municipalities, school choice and grant funds are used to supplement and go above and beyond.
Yeah.
We use that money to actually fund our budget. So when you look at it, it's tricky because you might see an amount of needed $80,000, but only coming out of the general fund, $10,000, because we've outsourced the other 80 to school choice or another account, where some other municipalities might be using choice for buying computers, buying laptops, building
Yeah.
programs, doing different things.
Yeah,
So
in other districts, where I was not having to use the school choice to offset
Yeah.
your full operating budget to the extent, this is the first district I've ever worked in a town that was the case.
For me personally, it's not the offsets that are so tricky. Like, when we get the budgets often by school, and to be honest, like, I don't really care what the cafeteria spends on food purchases per school. Maybe I care if we could sum that number up, you know what I'm saying?
The summary, yeah.
The summary, yeah.
Mhm. Oh,
That's-
sure, I could do that as a separate document.
Okay,
Sure.
that would
Yeah.
be something in a step to
Yeah.
make it a little easier, at least for me to understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And just to add to this, you can't even, I could print you out an expenditure report today until I have the final transfer list. You're not going to know where school choice is, where circuit breaker is, or even preschool, athletic revolving. Like, all of the Courtney's going to give me a year-end transfer because this is not a negative. The school department will zero out the general fund, so there's no turnbacks really. So if you look at each line, it'll be fully expended. And then, so there's some shifting between those other revolving accounts and the general fund. So you can't look at it today.
Right,
And
and I-
expect to know where it's going to end as of the end of July, when we actually do the.
Right, and I would actually say
Yeah, and a
Courtney's
lot of the
document, we
year-end
usually
stuff,
get is actually
yeah.
very good, because there is a column that says what we're getting from the revolving fund usually, and that sort of thing. So just a little more summarization.
You know, and I
would be great.
understand that, it is a lot to look at, you know, 34 pages.
Would be great.
There's like 800 lines.
And
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
multiple funds
Yeah.
supporting. I mean,
Right.
When you talk about,
Yeah.
athletic revolving preschool. you
Yep,
know, I'm just
grants,
looking at the
school
grants,
choice,
so there's-
circuit breaker,
there's a
revolving
lot-
funds,
a lot.
yeah.
And you really can't look at it,
Yep.
again, today, if I would printed the general fund, would mean nothing. We need to close the rest of the warrants and then figure out where we are at the end of July. which is
Yeah.
why I don't-
And that's the full operating budget, is with all of those, because that's what we're required by law to present, full operating budget. Yeah.
May I ask a
Go ahead, Carol.
question? The school choice out, like people who, from Douglas that decide they're going to send their kids to Uxbridge or someplace, where does that come into your budget?
That's an assessment that comes out of the.
Comes out of the town.
general fund.
Comes out of the general
Top of the revenue.
Of the town?
No, the town,
Yeah, town side,
The
yeah.
town side,
Yes.
Yeah.
not the school
It is
side?
not netted together. I know there's always confusion.
So
School gets the incoming,
if the town is paying out for the students that go out, then whatever money comes in should be paid into your budget, because we're paying for it. So I don't think that should be free money to you, quite frankly, on the school choice in.
Unfortunately, that's how it works.
But-
So,
Yeah, it's revenue to the school department.
I'm not fully comfortable with the
Yeah.
way the conversation's being framed. We have revenues total,
Right.
and the next line down would be revenues available for appropriation, for school or municipal. Before we get to revenues available for appropriation, we deduct school choice out. So it's not really coming from the town's budget or from the school's budget.
Yeah.
It's coming
Not the
from the
top.
whole pot
Yeah.
of
Okay.
revenues available
Yeah.
for appropriation.
Okay.
it's an assessment, no different than some of the other assessments
And
they
some other things
charge.
too.
Yeah.
too, as well.
It doesn't affect how we set up
Yeah.
their
You
allocation.
know,
makes
some other
sense,
things
Carol?
come out too.
It kind of does, but I'm
Yeah.
still back to my other
Yeah.
thing, school out,
I
it's
know,
it's
people
coming out of this
wanna-
hand, well, then it's
Yeah, I
it's
know.
all the
I
same
know.
thing.
I know.
Yeah.
I've had to-
It would be
I've
better if they
explained
called
that
it
for
something
27
different.
years, yeah. Yeah.
It would be better if they called it something different. In is the opposite of out,
Yeah.
and everybody
Yeah.
thinks that those things must net.
Yeah.
It's really an assessment, and then
Yeah.
choice in is like tuition revenue. And you just think about it that
Yeah.
way. We get revenue that we charge, that the state processes for us, and then we have revenue that we owe that comes out of the whole pot.
I kind of look at it like Norfolk Aggie is an assessment, BBT is an assessment,
Yeah.
Choice Out is an assessment. Those
Yeah.
come from available funds, those are fixed costs in some ways.
So
Yeah.
Norfolk Aggie does not come out of the school budget? No.
It's voted
Okay.
separately.
Okay, so the focus of our agenda tonight was to see where we stand to close the gap. I think we're good with where we stand process-wise, everybody? So Paula, Courtney, you guys are dismissed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Thank you very
coming.
much for coming.
Thank you.
Can you stay at the table, Matt?
Yeah, I got one point I want to make. It's
'Cause
philosophical.
Next, I have just kind of update on where we are,
Yeah.
some of our projects in town. So
So with the floor, I think it
we're
needs
moving
to
on
be-
from the school.
I know.
Okay.
No, this is overall process.
Yeah.
The Finance Committee needs to determine, I don't like being in the corner. I was put in the corner when I was bad. The Finance Committee needs to determine what it wants to see as part of the budget process.
Generally
So
speaking.
a needs budget, or I would call it an aspirational budget exercise, is when a department head comes in and says, to really do a bang-up job of my mission, I need to do all this stuff.
Right.
It may not, when you add up all the numbers, you end up with this huge red number at the bottom. And so, in a way,
Did we do that?
we did it. So, and it was the second time in my career I've done it, because I also did it in Tiverton, and it had the same effect. It is an incredibly divisive, unhelpful process that leads to people saying, I got cut by $100,000. No, your request didn't make it past the department head, the school committee in this instance, but you weren't cut because you might actually have more budget this year than you had last year, so you're still able to provide level service. Is not, so my argument for my discomfort with the way the fire chief would occasionally say, I put my truck in the budget and the town administrator cut it. Well, you requested one, there was no funds available to fund it for you, but you're still getting a substantial increase of the budget in your department. So I don't like the idea of, you cut me. I made decisions about what was necessary within the resource constraints of the town. And that's where I have a hard time with the largest department in town presenting aspirational budgets for conversation, because at the end of the day, it's more than half the budget. So if I'm looking at a spreadsheet that says I'm going to give them 2% or 2.1% this year, all of my other decisions as a town administrator for my municipal departments key off that. Because nobody's even close to as big as the school department. So once we kind of settle what we're going to be able to give them, I'm stuck with what's left.
I thought process-wise, we were starting the budget process by saying to everybody, you've got 2% or 3% or 1%.
That's where we've been since that one failed exercise with the aspirational
Okay.
budget. But the conversation earlier was we provide you with a needs budget. That, I don't look at it because I'm interested in what, I keep doing it to you. I'm interested in what the school committee has to say, because they're the final, that is what is being requested of town meeting, is what
Okay.
school committee asks for.
Well, when fall comes and we start working on the new budget, we can keep some of these things in mind. That's-
So where are we?
When's the new bridge going to be finished?
When National Grid decides they're going to finish. How's that? Is that a good answer?
Yes, perfect.
For those of you who work with National Grid, what's that?
National Grid is holding it up?
Well, they're not holding it up. The concrete has to cure.
Right.
So it's just going to sit there in the open area for a while.
So I guess I put,
National Grid has to install conduit
Okay.
under that bridge, and then conduit to the various sources of electricity going into the building. They owed us drawings a long time ago.
Oh, boy.
We don't have any. They haven't even started the drawings on the bridge. So if they don't hurry up, the concrete's going to cure before we're ready to put the electricity in. We are still on target to have the building turn a key and turn on the lights in November. That is the goal. Bob and Eric works very hard. I'm appreciative of the fact that he's doing reporting right now on 4 grants, 2 site readiness grants, a MassWorks grant, and a federal EDA grant. He's keeping up with all of it. I think he's minimizing his predation on the finance director's time. Is that fair? It's not that he never sits in your office and chews your ear off. It's just that it could be worse,
He's the
Gene.
helper.
It could be worse.
Oh, no, good.
He files all the paperwork for us, and millions of dollars are being transacted. And like any budget, it's constantly changing. So, I'm willing to sign change orders that are based on latent conditions in the field. So if we're looking under North Street and it's a train wreck, which is the case, instead of doing mill and overlay, we're going to completely rebuild North Street, reset the granite curbs, and because it's just impossible to deal with what's there right now. It's not safe and it's not cost effective. It'll just crumble very quickly. So those are the kinds of things that are going on with that project. There is a potential tenant for the Blackstone Valley Logistics building across 146, so that's the Tri-Town building. I'm not at liberty just yet to disclose the code name on that project from Mass Development. I will say there's a conversation that's ongoing with the potential tenant as to whether or not certain tax treaties or payment in lieu or what they're calling a TIF would be a live conversation. I can tell you that the 3 town administrators met with MBD this week and took an
just
awful...
Mass, what's MBD again?
Mass Business Development.
Yeah.
And we opened the spigots on the rain cloud on top of that umbrella. Because the notion of tax increment financing on a building that's already built and the
Right.
infrastructure's already installed is really silly. And so I'm not interested in that conversation. I would be if somebody said, National Grid can't get you a substation for 10 years, but we'll build you one. Well, a little bit more interesting now because we have a shortage of electricity. As far as we're approaching year end, Gene has a better handle than I do on budget to actual. I think we are doing decently on most of our accounts. I think the turn back will be in a historic range. We have asked for, have we received it yet? Our equity buy-in?
Yes, we do.
So we received our equity buy-in from Massachusetts Strategic Health Group, so that was 200,
It was 2+.
200, over $200,000. It's basically 1 year, 1 month of claims. In terms of, that group has grown now, so we have added 7 new members, so we have grown from 8 to 15
Towns?
towns
Wow.
and school districts. So we will now have 3 regional school districts and 14 towns. 2 of the towns are going to come in as a joint group, so they're too small. Salisbury and Merrimack come in together. But we have statewide reach, and we're starting to attract the unfavorable attention of certain staid interests that like building their reserves and not delivering value the way we do.
So Matt, when you think about a year or 2 ago when you had, or we had certain assumptions about economic growth in town, do you see anything looking forward of a major derailment, or are we still optimistic going forward in terms of revenue growth and so on?
We have never built this economic development into our budget model. Never. We are not counting on it. The day it happens, we'll blow confetti in the air. Okay? But until then, it's not part of our forecast. That doesn't mean I haven't thought about how we could, do some pretty cool stuff that we really need to do to control costs over the long run, and get the schools some more resources. And that's fine with me, but it's all, again, aspirational. It's all fantasy until it actually comes.
So when we meet again in the fall and we start working on our new budget, we can start putting some clothes on those hangers in terms of specifics and so on, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's we are under tremendous pressure. All municipalities are trying to hire skilled staff for specific positions. And it's felt very much at the schools. It's felt in both our fire and police departments. So the town of Uxbridge just went out to hire both paramedics and basic EMTs and offered a rate of pay that was significantly higher than Douglas's and significantly higher than many other people's. You know how many applications they got for 6 positions? 3. And there's no saying that any of those 3 people was even remotely qualified. And in the meantime, we have extreme financial distress in the town of Dudley, which is not far from here, and they're bleeding people. There is no worse place to be right now than a town that is laying off qualified staff when there's a shortage of labor in the market. I will tell you something, if those guys from Dudley come over and work for us here in Douglas, they ain't going back. All right, we'll do everything we can. So I think Dudley and Wellfleet are on the same road to perdition. It's horrible what's going on. But our ship is still sailing a straight line. I don't really think there's any problem implementing comp reform. I do think we will need to revisit, either in November or in May, the call firefighter chart in order to take into consideration the fact that we're having a hard time getting, especially fill-in paramedics, so people might come work 8 hours at a time for us. Our rate is not even close to being competitive. And I had set that chart up to have its internal logic, that there was always a step, and a step, and a step, and it just can't preserve that. It doesn't make any sense to say to somebody, here's $23 an hour to be a per diem paramedic, and they can go to the privates and get 40. It's not sustainable.
Gene, where do we stand with building permits? Are we really busy right now, do you know? Or Matt, do you know? Are we high, low historically?
That's a question for me. I think we're doing well. I think we are not far off from where we have been for the last couple of years. Neither up nor down.
Permit in there, so the number's going to be skewed this year.
Okay.
So if you back that down, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
What, I didn't hear what you said, why the numbers would be skewed.
Well, there's the large building permit fee that's in.
Oh, okay, because of the.
Right.
The warehouse
Right,
permit
right,
is in
yeah.
there.
So once you take that back out, then you can compare it to a previous.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's what you want to do.
In terms of major issues that may come up before May, I want to flag one. There comes a time when every community has to consider its existence and its future and what it wants to be in 10, 20 years. And some of the major raw land transactions that have occurred or may occur here in Douglas reflect the potential for a significant change in the character of the community and some of its most significant natural environment. So I'll go out on a limb here. I'm not supposed to comment on policy. I will only share my experience with you. Growing up in Cumberland, Rhode Island, which was a beautiful dairy farm town, and there was nothing from the state border down to 295 except small suburban subdivisions in rural America. And it was absolutely gorgeous farmland that had gone back to the late 1600s, early 1700s. And now the town is 37,000 people. And it's just, you can't even move. It takes 45 minutes to get from my old house in Cumberland to the ball field that's halfway down. That's insane. The way you stop that from happening, there's two things you can do. One is you have a land trust that begins to aggressively purchase at market rates from landowners and preserves the land for conservation. The other thing you can do is to begin to take an aggressive approach to Chapter 61. So if property's coming out of 61, the town has...
That's the agricultural, right?
Agricultural and forestry, there's 61, 61A, 61B. When that property comes out of 61, the town has a right of first refusal, which is a very important property right that no one can skip over. They're trying, but they can't not notify us and then say that their transaction is valid. That doesn't work that way. We have the property right and that right of first refusal. We need to be in a position as a town to have the resources available to preserve things that the town meeting wants to try to preserve. And I'm telling you that this is your crossroads, right? And it may only be a couple $1 million, but it may change the way Douglas looks and feels forever. And so I do see that coming around. It's not being driven by economic development next to the highway. It's being driven by the need for housing and the ability to still buy relatively cheap backland in Douglas. And as long as you're willing to fight the battle to get a road back, you can unlock a tremendous amount of housing stock, which is very concerning because in some parts of town, we don't have the infrastructure to support that. So we'd either have to waste all this new growth, paving roads we haven't needed to pave, right? Because nobody lives there. It's just a horrible way to, and then they build all these houses and everybody's going to the schools and now Paul and Courtney are running around trying to hire teachers and fill more classrooms and the expenses just go through the roof. That is what Cumberland did. We just got into this never-ending cycle of having to get to the next growth cycle so we could pay for what we already had. That's all I have really now on the budget. For specific questions about specific departments, I'll try to answer them.
Anybody questions for Matt at this point?
One quick one. On the CRG warehouse, you said hopefully lights on November. Really, 12/31's the drop dead date. Is that my understanding correct? That has to be assessed by 12/31 to be able to be...
12/30 in case it snows on 12/31.
12/30 to get that revenue for the 25 budget. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else for Matt?
So if the lights are not on, which they haven't even gotten underneath the bridge there with the electric, and they haven't even got the plans yet,
It's
it
the
may
plans.
not hit December 31st. So what do they get, do they get assessed on how much is built?
Yes.
So they get assessed on the value of how much is built?
Yep.
Okay, the value of the land, and stuff like that?
Yep.
Which always
Well, and
turned
the
out to
building
be
as
quite
it
value,
stands.
Didn't it?
So I'm cautiously optimistic. I know it sounds like there's
Yeah.
delays, but this is the private sector. People will work 7 days a week, 16 hours a day, if their boss says they have to. So,
All right, anybody else for Matt? All right, Mr.
Well, I
Woj-
just have
oh,
one question.
Go ahead,
How would we
Carol.
find out what all these numbers mean?
well, so I didn't go to the trouble of trying to put the
Right.
labels next to the activity codes. I mean, I can send you all that information.
Wow.
What I provided you with this for is for you to see the complexity. Some accounts went way up, some went way down. So that's the story, right? Those are questions you can ask the school department, and that's the richness of the change in the financial condition of the organization is that it isn't all going up, it isn't all going down. That's not how our budget life works.
Okay, Carol, you got that?
I got that.
Okay. Anybody else for Matt? All right, Mr. Wojcik, thank you.
Thanks, you.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
All right, we're looking at our agenda, everybody. No reserve fund transfers, correct, Gene? All right, the thing you made copies for, did you hand those out?
Pass them to Howard.
So on our agenda, we have FinCom expenses and payroll. So Gene, can you walk us through this handout once we, wait till we all get it, okay?
Yes. Thank you. So Dick has the authority to approve invoices and payroll on behalf of the Finance Committee. So this is just a report for the year of what has been spent out of their FinCom. And it's really to make you aware of what he approved.
And if you look at these totals, Gene, are they
So the totals are...
out of order? Are they consistent with other years, pretty much?
Yeah, I think the postage and the, you're going to see the postage and the town meeting flyer costs going up, and one of it is because we had some large articles on the town meeting, so, the paper count, the page count, increases that cost, and postage has been increasing, so I think that's the driver here. The minute taker depends on how long your meetings are, so the quicker the meeting, the less money you spend.
Howard's point.
But, I mean, those are the biggest drivers. But it is really just to inform you.
So anytime I come down and sign something, that's what this,
That is what this is.
okay.
yes.
Any questions for Gene on this, anybody? Thank you, Gene, for putting this together. Appreciate it. All right, let's look at minutes. I sent you these. I encourage you not to print out April 11, but read it on your device because it was 9 pages. So let's
Make
look.
a motion to approve the March 21st minutes.
Okay, Howard moves we approve March 21.
Second.
Second by Heather. Discussion?
Can I make one adjustment?
Okay.
So during my presentation of the recreation,
So where are you on the paper, Ryan?
E, 8:18 PM, 1,
Yep, on page 2, yeah.
yeah, when she talks about and I just lost it here, she talks the soccer goals are in need of new nets. It's actually the netting behind the soccer goals. Small point, but my soccer friends will not be happy with me.
Okay.
Don't get that corrected. It's the netting behind the soccer goals to prevent the ball from hitting into the woods.
Okay, so,
Move that the minutes be approved with Ryan's verbal amendment.
Second.
okay, Heather, you seconded the original motion. Okay, so the motion is to approve the minutes of March 21, 2023 with a slight correction as described by Ryan. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries.
Heather moves to approve the March 28th minutes.
I think you can do that.
Heather, did you want to say something?
So this was,
March 28th, I make a motion to approve March 28th, 2023 meeting minutes.
so Heather moves, we approve March 28, seconded by
Howard?
Howard D'Amico. Questions on those minutes, anybody, or discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. And then the one from April 11 had all the detail from that public hearing before the budget, so that had lots of numbers in it.
Yes, I move that we approve the Tuesday, April 11, 2023 meeting minutes.
Okay, Sandy moves we approve April 11, seconded by
I second that.
Howard D'Amico. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. And then May 1 was our little meeting right before the town meeting, and then we recessed, and then we met again, and then adjourned after the town meeting. Any,
I move that we approve the Monday, May 1, 2023 meeting minutes.
okay, Sandy moves we approve.
I'll second.
Seconded by Ryan. Discussion, anybody? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain?
I'll abstain.
Heather and Howard abstain. You were absent, I think, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so the motion carries. All right, if you look at your agenda, I put in when everybody's term ends, and I just wanted to double check if that was correct. So Howard, did you get a letter from the town moderator that you've been re-upped?
I did.
And was that okay with you?
It was.
Okay. Heather, are you the same? Or no, Lynn, okay, I haven't heard from Lynn, so. But is that date correct, everybody? Like Carol, you're 2025, is that right? And then Heather, you're 2024, is that correct? And then Lynn is out of town, and then I'm 2024, okay. So Howard earlier mentioned we not meet in September, but meet in October. Howard, do you want to elaborate on that?
So before we get to that, can we skip to 9?
Open session?
Yeah.
Okay.
So when do we reformulate the structure for the next year?
After July the 1st. I checked with Lisa with the selectmen, and she said you really should wait after July 1, because that's when the new,
Yeah,
Term
that
starts.
doesn't, I don't disagree with that.
so our first meeting after July, we would do it.
Okay, so today, we'll be scheduling that meeting as well, right? And the concept is, should we do that all at once with the next meeting? So, yeah, I didn't hear the questions be particularly pointed in that direction, but I thought I heard at one point either Paul or Courtney say that they thought that they would have more information. I thought that word October was used. And so I certainly, to the extent we're talking about a November fall town meeting, I would rather wait and have a more information-filled meeting in October, early October perhaps, and one in September, and then anticipate having another one in October.
Jean, do you anticipate we would need to meet in September for anything you need signed or approved or
I
not?
think, to Howard's point, the earliest I would schedule it would be September 26th. And the only reason why, depending on when that November town meeting is,
Right.
we're going to have the warrant for you to review. So it depends on how full you want those agendas. So you typically meet opposite the board, which is the second and
Second and fourth, yeah.
if we have a November meeting, you're going to be looking at that. Second October meeting is your first chance to look, the second week of October is your
October
first chance.
10th, right.
And where, is that going to give, I don't know even know what the warrant's going to look like.
And we don't know.
We'd have to-
We don't know the date for the special yet.
We'd likely have to approve it that night, too, right, to get the printing out and all that
You
good
only have
stuff.
that so those 2 bites of it, because again, we'll have to have the flyer done, we'll have
That's
to have
right.
the comments. So that's why I would probably pencil in the 26th of September.
That works. Yeah.
So that's when we would reorganize and whatever else came up that needed to be acted on.
I think we can, have a discussion of what the growth is. And again, to Matt's point, when you look at Cherry Sheet, any change in it now, it's like when my kids went to college, right? I had that expense at the house. I couldn't go out to eat. Our lives are different here because we have the override and, my kids are graduating from college. Okay, I have a little more flexibility, so. So I think we're in a different.
Yeah, I saw you at Wendy's the other night, Jean.
You were back out eating.
That doesn't even count for going out.
I mean, there's not as much, there's always pressure on the budget. But, back then, we're talking 4 years ago, $10,000 was a big deal. Now we're able to absorb that a little more. That's my point. So where the state aid may not be a big number, a big change, it's still a change. So we have to be mindful of that.
So September 26th.
September 26th, yes.
That's what she meant to say.
Is that okay with everybody? We shoot for September
And then
26th?
what will the October?
And then October 10 or
It would be the-
24, right?
Depending on the I didn't bring my calendar with me. So-
Which holiday do you want, Jean?
So Columbus Day is in there.
The 9th,
The
probably.
9th is a Monday. That's the second Monday, is the
So
9th.
then it would be the 10th, yeah.
Yeah.
So we would meet back to back?
Well, it's two weeks between.
That'd be 2 weeks.
For what purpose again?
The special town meeting in the fall.
We don't know that date yet, though, do we?
We don't, but it's typically, it's definitely not Veterans Day week. And it's definitely not Thanksgiving, so it's usually the first.
So we have November 6th is a Monday,
Yes.
and November 13th is a Monday. 11th is a Saturday,
Okay, so it's, my guess it's going to be probably the 13th.
probably the
The
13th.
6th was, I think the 6th is too early, so I would vote for the 13th. But we have to check with the moderator and the town
Okay.
clerk.
I
So-
think we need 2 meetings instead of 1.
I think you need 2 meetings because you're going to be seeing the warrant for the first time. You're going to have to make the recommendation for the second.
Ryan's council. Okay.
Plus everything comes to us too during that too.
For the people that
So-
are affected, you won't have all departments
Right.
at that one, but anybody that's going to have an amendment.
So probably September 26th and October 10,
Oh,
probably,
you
right?
definitely have,
On the 10th.
the 10th, you're hoping to have a draft, well, you have to have a
Okay.
draft of the 10th. And then you'll do recommendations for the following meeting.
So any objection to us shooting for September 26th?
No?
With the understanding we'll meet again probably on October 10th?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask to invite the Board of Health to come to get an update on the sticker situation and whether we're going to have enough revenue, if they've generated enough revenue?
Made it over 350.
Which meeting,
So for
Ryan?
September 26th?
What did we make over 350?
Maybe
the
that's their
permits.
break, that's their break.
There's their break-even point, right? They raised rates, and when they came before us in May, it was
Yeah, I-
unclear whether,
They were going to get
yeah,
enough.
But
I
that,
can actually get you that number.
Okay.
We're close to the end now. It really, for me, the bigger piece is what the new contract is going to be for the hauling rates.
and will that be decided in September?
They signed a 1 year, so it will be decided by December, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty big issue in town, and I'd like to
Yeah.
get an update on where they stand financially and what their plans are. for
Yeah, but
the
I can get, I'll send you the revenue where we are.
Thank you.
I was, yeah. It's definitely, when we sell them once a year, and it was in March.
When you get over 65, they drop it. Oh, they went up quite a bit for over 65.
Still cheaper
But
than-
But it's still a good deal.
It is still.
The whole dump, I can't use the word dump, the transfer station is a good deal. I mean, you can go there 3 times a week if you want. So just one bag, throw it in.
All true.
all right. We good, everybody, with September 26th? And that's when we'll reorganize for the next year. Anybody else have something that isn't on the agenda of recent? All right, we have a motion to
Motion to
adjourn.
adjourn.
So Sandy moves, we adjourn at 8:22. We need a
I'll
second.
second that.
Carol seconds. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, oppose, abstain. We adjourn at 8:22.